Well, we might make a start, and feel free to use the Q&A button or feature of Zoom to ask your questions. We will be looking at them as we go along, but I think just for the the process might be better if we save most of the questions till the end. We've got a Q&A section coming up. So to use the Q&A feature, if you're not familiar with Zoom, down the bottom there's a little control bar. Just hit the Q&A button, a little box pops up, and you can ask your question and we'll respond to it. So welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your very busy days. I do understand at the moment everyone's absolutely flat out. So again, really appreciate everyone turning up. And I really hope that today you'll get something out of this session. If you like, put into the chat window what you hope to achieve out of this session. And if there's anything that's left over that we haven't covered that you thought might be really useful for you, we can always follow up with you afterwards. We'll also be providing contact details for myself as well, so you can always get in touch with us. On the agenda today, and in just a moment, I'll introduce myself and Blackbook, as well as our guest speaker today, who is Scott from Hastings Deering. And we'll actually be touching on a little bit around UX for analytics, the user experience of analytics, which was Blackbook's focus in this particular engagement, along with some other bits and pieces. But Hastings Deering have had a very long journey to really bring together all of their data and make it really, really useful. And they're getting real value out of it. And because there is just so much information and so many things that they need to address, it's such a large organization, it's quite complex, that we really saw that we needed to, I guess, get some optimizations from the consumption of reports and dashboards. People were spending a little bit too long trying to find the information, and we needed a clearer way to really get the answers. So I'll leave that obviously for Scott to go through. He's got a fantastic a project to talk about here, and I'm really happy that you could make the time to come and talk to us today, Scott. So very quickly, the Customer Spotlight series, this is what it's all about. So Blackbook have decided that we want to highlight some of the successes, and especially, everyone working remotely, sometimes it's hard to have those quick coffee chats where you might find out some of the better things that have happened in your organization or with your friends and families. So we thought this would be a really good way to showcase really our engagements with our customers and what our customers are achieving. So the series is really about automation and the hype cycle around automation and where we actually get value through the use of AI and automation. So today's discussion actually touches a little bit on the presentation side. It's almost right down the very end where we talk about why we have put all of this effort into getting our data ready, putting it into reports and dashboards and validating the data. And for those of you who are doing machine learning and AI, a lot of work goes into really ensuring the accuracy and high performance of those models. So we don't want to do all of that work to save heaps of time, to then go to our dashboards and our reports and spend the whole day trying to work out how to look at the data and understand what is the correct data or not. To believe it or not, there's a process to follow to do that. So that's what we'll be also discussing today. So before we go into that, so just to introduce myself, my name is James Payne. I'm the Head of Digital and DataOps at Blackbook, and I have virtually transported myself to Barbados, where their local traditions include tea and cricket in the afternoon. So I just thought I'd throw that one in there. I've never been to Barbados, but it's now on my list after a little bit of Google searching. And Scott, if you're ready to unmute yourself to say hello, Scott is from Hastings Deering or Sun Darby Industrial, sorry. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself further?
Thanks, James, and thanks for having me today. So like James said, my name's Scott Theuerkauf. I'm the Integrated Supply Chain Solutions Manager at Hastings Deering. And I guess today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done with Blackbook in terms of data and analytics and how we're sort of using that to deliver some real value across our organisation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott. So I guess a tiny little bit about Blackbook, just to set the scene. For those of you who haven't heard of us or worked with us before, we've actually traditionally been known for the RPA, software robotics automation, or RPA, sorry, robotics process automation, as well as AI. We've got a really strong AI team as well. So, but what's sort of been hiding in the background, not deliberately, is an entire capability around analytics and data management, as well as full stack development. And what we found is that without really specifically driving these capabilities, a lot of customers are really actually getting a lot of value out of these services. So we thought it worth, I thought it worth introducing those capabilities as well today. If you have any questions about them, just hit me up afterwards, and I'll let you know obviously what we do. But not to delay further, the more exciting stuff. UX for analytics. I'll put a question mark there because I think maybe about 1 in 10 people know what UX is, really, you know, down to the detail. And most people have probably thought that it doesn't even apply in the analytics arena. So with today's topic around how do you make your data sing, well, we've got all of our data. We work really hard building our reports and our dashboards. You know, some organizations have hundreds and hundreds of metrics, terabytes of data. Other organizations might have 5 or 10 metrics and 100 megabytes of data. Reality is we need to save time and improve the accuracy of our reporting and of interpreting these reports, because our users depend on those reports being accurate. There's no point having a whole, you know, a plethora of dashboards and reports if maybe half of the reports are hard to navigate. Perhaps there's a lot of clutter on the page and we don't really know which metrics are the ones we want, or every time we go and use these reports, we go and to that specific spot just to pull out that piece of information every time. And I know I've done that, and even to this day, I still have some reports that I need to get to bring up to speed. So we've really invested a lot in, as well, bringing the data in. We can't forget that the data pipeline, so to speak, is actually quite complex. There's a lot of data ingestion. It traditionally used to be 80–90% of the project. A little bit better these days with the modern data warehouse. We can get a little bit more done. And so we don't want to waste our investment in those areas either by spending the time elsewhere. So why wouldn't we optimize our reports and dashboards? So here are some of the probably the most common, I guess, topics or the most common feedback from customers, really about the challenges that they have. And when I first bring up the topic of UX or even just UX UI, they say, oh, like, yeah, you know, it's really hard to find the information. And when I find it, I'm not really sure if that's what I'm looking at. If those bars, you know, the column bars or the bars or the columns, they're really close together. So I can't really tell, you know, sometimes it's 1% variance and sometimes it's 100% variance. So it's very difficult to really gauge the, you know, really the accuracy and understand or trust that that's what you're reading. And we shouldn't be putting that burden onto the users. You know, the last thing I want is if I've just got 2 minutes or 1 minute to quickly look at some information to make sure that we're tracking something properly and we're achieving what we need to achieve, I don't have time to go in and work out which charts to look at, decipher the numbers. I may as well have an Excel spreadsheet with the numbers on them, really, because that way at least I know where it is. So what we want to do is really call out, how do we make our visuals really, really useful? And we want to instill an at-a-glance monitoring capability in the organization. We want it to be the default behavior when we create dashboards, when we create reports. I want to be able to look at that report and within seconds know what it is that I'm seeing. It's really hard to get to that point when you haven't seen it really happening before. And it's really, really common. Don't feel bad. There aren't a lot of really formal training providers out there that focus on communication through visualization. And there's a handful of textbooks out there. They're really, really useful. Some of them are really useful. A few of them just very long. There's a lot of reading and you don't really get a huge amount of benefit from them. But what we've done is we've collated all of the information. We've spoken to the experts and we've, more importantly, spoken to our clients and understood what it is that drives a very effective dashboard versus, I guess, the ineffective dashboards. And so that topic there of the formal training, that really is what Blackbook brought to this particular engagement with Hastings Deering. There are, of course, so many other topics to discuss, but let's save that for another time. So I've definitely touched on and repeatedly said, why do we want to do this? We want the users to find the information quickly. They want to be able to trust it. And when they want to go sideways, they want to go across to the next page, or they want to go back, they want to go up to a higher level in their hierarchy, or they want to drill down into more detail. That navigation is, really, really important. It has to be intuitive. We don't need people to be sitting there or worst case, talking to IT support and saying, how do I find this information? How do I drill up or drill down? Because I could say first, second level support probably have never seen the report that you're looking at anyway. So they'll be sitting there asking the same questions. So we want to take away that part so that you can now spend your time improving your business, becoming more competitive in the market. How do we do it? What are the steps that we actually do, that we actually take? So what we found has worked really well for us in the past is really conducting UX design workshops. Now, they're not really onerous. Sometimes they can take half an hour. Sometimes maybe a few hours, or maybe a couple of hour sessions over a few days, just depending on who we want and the size of the organization, the size of the project. But just imagine if you've read anything about UX in the past, quite a few years ago, maybe around 2013 to 2015, UX was really sort of coming up in the market as an essential part of, I guess, delivering, a positive user experience, but good user interfaces. And it fed back information to the developers and to the designers. It literally changes how applications are built. The pages that a website have, or the pages that you have in your app, and mobile apps are synonymous with UX design. It's essentially why UX came about initially. So why can't we do the same process with everything? It's just a bit of software. Our reports are just bits of software that are giving us some numbers. So our first step is really to sit down together, look at the reports that you want to get more value from in your organization, and talk about the experience that you currently take, or I guess the actions that you currently take. A good way to, I guess, make sure that you get value out of doing a workshop I'm pretty sure everyone has seen either MasterChef or some sort of cooking show. Have you ever wondered why they talk to themselves the whole time? I'm pretty sure if you met these people before they went to MasterChef and you watch them cook, they'll just cook in silence. One of the, I guess, the tenets of UX design is to observe and have someone talk about what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. So if I'm watching one of these chefs cook in the kitchen and they're silent, I have no idea what they're trying to do. I can kind of see, oh, they're putting some rice on, they're getting the barramundi out, but I don't understand what their thought process is. When it comes to analytics, it's even harder. All we can see is someone moving the mouse around on the screen, going back and forth between the pages. And we don't really know what it is that they're thinking. So a really good tip for getting the workshops to run smoothly and to get value out of them is to have people talk about what it is that they're trying to do, literally as they use the report. Why are they doing it? How do they think they want to do it? But what do they actually have to do to get that information out? Jot that down, and at the end of the day, hopefully you have roughly 7 different people or 7 different perspectives on the report for the ultimate. If you can only get 1 or 2 people, that's okay. And you'll really see some common patterns emerge. The other, the other tip that I think is really kind of back to that training comment earlier is about having a research-backed approach. And what I mean is, let's not just presume that a bar chart is better than a line chart for this scenario. We should be able to be deterministic and say, every time we have data that's laid out like this, a bar chart is 99% of the time the best choice. And by the way, here's the reasons why that 1% would have a different type of chart. And we've spent a lot of time over the years compiling, I guess, notes about the different types of charts and why you would use them. And, you know, getting your hands on that research and incorporating that into your everyday practices is really, really valuable for your organization. What actually goes into that though? It's really just 13 common mistakes that we find in pretty much every dashboard and report that's ever been made. These are topics that reflect, let me see if I could pull up an example here. I don't think you can see this, but some of the 13 common mistakes include things like exceeding the boundaries of a single screen, having inadequate context for the data, or expressing measures indirectly and not directly. We also look at the amount of clutter, the misuse of or overuse of colors, and the arrangement of information on the page. And a really important one for me is the navigation. We very rarely have one page with all of the information we ever need on it. So being able to navigate clearly and quickly is really, really important. So if you want to, I guess, get more detail on the 13 common mistakes, obviously hit me up. I'll be more than happy to shoot them over to you, and you feel free to ask any questions you like about them. That's probably, you know, one of the more tangible takeaways from here today. What do we do with all that information? It's great having a big list of things to work on. I've made it less cluttered, yes. I'm no longer overusing colors, yes. All of a sudden, you've got what we call a design guide or a style guide. So the style guide is something that a lot of marketing teams would usually have already, especially when you're heavy into branding, and you've got a lot of logos and you have a lot of presentations and things like that. So what we sometimes do, or often do, is when we talk to the clients, we find that reusing the same color schemes to a point and maybe reusing some really common icons for big areas of the organization or big topics of the organization. For example, with one organization, we were doing a sustainability study. They had a whole bunch of icons around the use of green colors and leafy plants and things like that as well. So putting them in the right spot drew just the right amount of attention and applied context to those metrics. So having a design guide is very, very useful as well. So thank you for sitting through that. All of your questions, I promise we will answer them. I will actually hand over to Scott now to talk about the big part of the project.
Thanks, James. And I thought today, before we sort of jump into the actual use cases, I might just start with providing a little bit of background around Hastings Deering and our journey in relation to data and analytics. And I guess we're like a lot of organisations in that we're rich with data, probably more than we know what to do with. We have some pockets of localised capability across our organisation, but I'd say it's not ingrained into the way we do work. However, we sort of understand it's a required capability to compete effectively in today's marketplace. And, you know, even though we do have some capability, we're often very much focused on, you know, a rear view picture of what's happened. So really focused on what's happened after the fact rather than looking forward in terms of how do we get insight so we can use that to make more informed decisions that drive value across our organisation. And I guess I sort of look at supply chain processes as, you know, sort of analytical objects, and they're increasingly growing in terms of size and complexity. And we're faced with a number of issues which prevent us from using that information effectively. Stuff like the quality and completeness of that data, you know, the tool set to be able to effectively leverage it, you know, the right amount of talent to be able to manage it. And then, you know, to James's point, one of the areas where I guess we've struggled a little bit is then, even when we do have that information, how do we communicate it effectively? That's been a real focus for us and the supply chain in particular within Hastings Deering. That's where we've looked to engage with Blackbook on a couple of key projects with a real focus on sort of turning data to insight, and then ensuring we have the processes in place to deliver that insight for consumption to our business, so they can make smarter decisions. So, and I sort of call it conquering the last mile. So how do we actually embed analytics into the decision-making process to create value? So James, if you just want to sort of jump to the next slide. So one of the projects we engaged with Blackbook on in terms of their help and support was sort of middle of last year. We were engaged to conduct the network study. And this was really focused on understanding our network and our distribution capabilities, and then looking at a future state network design to allow us to profitably grow, but also manage some of the complexity within our business. And I guess an important call out is, you know, we've always seen, you know, the strength of the HD and Caterpillar DC network as being part or core to our organisational strategy and a real point of difference. So the focus as part of this piece of work was not so much on tearing up what has always worked, but rather enhancing the traditional model. And the decision was not a knee-jerk reaction. It was quite a conscious decision to look at how we could transform our supply chain to maximise opportunities and really accelerate our ability to be able to respond to changing customer behaviours and events and disruptions. And so our approach was really first to, you know, look at creating a baseline of our current state network. And that required, you know, a key part of that was really around preparing the data. So in terms of, you know, size and complexity of data, you know, we had about 456,000 part warehouse combinations. So for this particular study, there was a total of about 7.6 million lines of data, covering everything from sort of cost, service, target levels, plan and lead times, customer locations, order size and frequency. And I guess the outcome of that was we were really able to drill down to the lowest level of detail in our supply chain, which in itself provided a lot clearer picture of our network and enabled us to really gather some insight around stuff like, you know, top senders, drop-off locations, weight and volume buckets. And I'll probably also call out importantly as part of this network study, it had been something that we had previously engaged outside consultants on before to support. The decision was made as part of this particular project to do it in-house in order to build capability, but also allow us to continuously refine and optimize the model as we move forward. So once we sort of gathered the initial baseline, the next real step in the process was how do we bring that to life by adding additional operating data to support future state modeling, defining some of the parameters for the future network model, but then really building the logic and models which would allow us to simulate the changes. And then the third step in that process was really around simulating those changes and comparing the baseline to understand insight. And I guess there was a couple of areas or challenges we faced as we worked through this project where we engaged with Blackbook to really come in and support us. And I guess the first one was really, and it became quite apparent very quickly, was due to some of the size and complexity of the data and the calculations and logics that were being performed. We sort of hit critical mass pretty quickly. So we had 7.6 million lines of data. So our ability to be able to really process and query that data set and do it in near real time to allow us to continuously refine and update and validate the model was a real challenge. One of the things where we engaged Blackbook support as we went through this process was in terms of helping us implement Azure analysis services, which then really provided us the ability to be able to process and query this massive data set in near real time and do so in a real quick and robust manner. So that was the first challenge, but the second challenge and sort of some of the stuff that James touched on earlier was really around how do we present this data to non-technical audience and be able to clearly communicate through visualizations the benefits of changes or particular scenarios. And one of the things, we've got some really good people in our organization with a really good knowledge of our business and our strategy, and I'd say they're very capable in terms of what I would refer to as data wrangling or data analysis, which is really looking at, finding, cleaning and structuring that data, and then sort of developing the models and the algorithms and the patterns, which would allow us to inform the decisions. But an area where we really lack is around the design. So this is really around the ability to be able to develop visual communications and presentations to tell a story using data. Which I think is especially critical when sort of presenting this type of information back to a non-technical audience. So it was really around how do we sort of merge data science, visualization, and then the narrative to enhance the experience of a Power BI report and dashboard to allow us to clearly communicate to people across our organization the value of some of these changes. And that's where we engaged Blackbook. And there was a number of things that went into that process. And James sort of touched on a couple of them, but it was really about building out the front end. And you can sort of see some of the graphics on the right, which was some of the and I apologize for all the stuff that's blanked out, but some of it's confidential in terms of numbers. But what they were able to do through conducting a number of UX workshops, they were able to design and develop a front-end visualization which allowed us to clearly communicate across the board the impacts of these changes, and that drove some real value across our organisation. And it was an area where I said, we were somewhat lacking in terms of skills and experiences. And I guess the results of this process, have delivered a number of different benefits. So one, the ability and capability to be able to, analyse and assess our supply chain, which is really a necessity in today's environment in terms of allowing us to quickly identify potential risks and opportunities. But the other thing that we've sort of developed or got as an outcome of this is, across our business, people now have a much better understanding of supply chain and also an understanding of the contribution they make to it, and also promoted a much stronger awareness and increased insight of some of the drivers across the supply chain and the impact of their particular behaviours or actions on the organisation as a whole. So this was sort of the first project, and I guess then there was the more tangible benefits in terms of the modelling and being able to identify the benefits. So what we were able to clearly demonstrate through changes to our networks, how we could deliver a significant benefit in terms of a cost saving. And just in terms of raw numbers, I think we identified about $10 million of identified savings, which was effectively a reduction of about $14 per order. At the same time, one of the key outcomes was we did not want to impact customer service. So through this process, we were actually able to identify an improvement of about 1.3% in terms of on time in full. And we were able to identify a significant reduction in inventory across our network. But the benefit of the work we've done with Blackbook in here is now we're able to leverage this model to identify further opportunities. So we're now able to simulate stuff like growth and capacity. We're now able to use this model to support other businesses within our organisation with similar sort of initiatives. But the value really came through being able to present this in a way which our executive stakeholders understood and could see in a very simple snapshot the impact of these changes. And I think, you know, like most organisations, when you go through these type of processes, normally the output is something like a 55-page PowerPoint presentation. What we got really was, you know, 3 or 4 Power BI pages, which were able to clearly communicate to the business the benefits of these changes, whereas before, you know, we would have a 55-page PowerPoint presentation. So that was sort of the first, I guess, use case where we engaged Blackbook. And James, if you just want to go to the next one. And then the second one was really around the design and developing of a business intelligence dashboard. So like most organisations, we have more metrics than we know what to do with. But as an organisation, we haven't necessarily been overly metric driven. And some of the reasons for that was because of the inability to clearly communicate those metrics, the inability to be able to provide that information in a useful format. So one of the things we work with Blackbook on was really around developing a business intelligence dashboard, which included all the most relevant KPIs across our organisation, which would then provide our business with the ability to be able to steer on KPIs and help them to develop a company-wide insight into Hastings Deering's performance and opportunities for improvement. And again, the same process we sort of went through with the network design we took for this. So again, a number of UX workshops, building out the front end. We went through various different iterations of it where, something was developed, it was shared, we provided feedback. And, something that probably I wasn't overly aware of, but, the importance of even stuff like color schemes and icons and consistency. And again, we've seen some really positive outcomes as a result of being able to, communicate to the broader business how they are performing in relation to a range of key metrics. And one of the outcomes of being able to present this information in a consistent, easy to use and intuitive manner is, as an organisation, we participate in a program that all Caterpillar dealers globally participate in. There's about 170 dealers globally. And as part of that program, we are measured on a number of key metrics and attributes, which are included in this dashboard. And as part of that, we're able to use this dashboard to drive improvements in performance, which related in Hastings Deering reaching gold status as a dealer as part of that program. And again, it was only through providing that visibility in terms of performance and being able to clearly communicate it through data that we've been able to really drive those benefits and outcomes. So they were sort of the couple of projects we worked on with Blackbook. I guess, is there any questions in relation to any of those?
I've clicked over to the Q&A slide, Scott. I hope that's what your intention was. We have a Q&A panel, but nobody is typing at the moment. I think you've answered all their questions. Ryan has a question. Let's allow Ryan to talk. This could be dangerous. Okay, Ryan, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. First caller on the line.
So yeah, I do actually have a question. So in all of this, I suppose, what was the experience for, I suppose, the business stakeholders? How were they involved and sort of brought along the journey in the development of those dashboards, the development of those tools to ensure that, I suppose, they were designed as fit for purpose, but also that they continue to be used ongoing?
Yeah, that was a little bit faint. I think what I heard is how do we sort of bring along the key stakeholders on the journey in terms of developing the dashboards and the tools, and then ensure that they continuously use them once we implement it? Was that sort of it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep, great. So I guess, one of the things that we look to identify through those UX web, workshops were who were going to be the key stakeholders or end users of these particular tools. And in some cases, for instance, the network design, it was a reasonably small and specific group of users that would use that tool and would need access to it. And then, for the dashboard, it was more business wide. But again, we were able to clearly identify through those workshops who would be the key end users. And it was important through those workshops that we engaged them in terms of the development of the dashboards and the reports. And part of that process was understanding the intended audience, how they would use those dashboards, and where they saw the value. So we engaged that group through those workshops to get their feedback and input into actual design and development of those dashboards. And then I guess how we've continued or tried to continue to ensure that they are using the tools and they're engaged in the process. So we've done that through a number of different ways. One, through communicating across the board of business, I guess the availability of the tools, but then also, provide them the opportunity to be able to access them through various different devices. So, one of the things when we went through the process of design and the actual dashboards and the tools was making sure that regardless of the design, that they could, access those reports through their mobile devices or smart devices and be able to still see and use it in such a way where they could actually gain value. So one of the real big pushes in our organisation, in particular in relation to the dashboard, was the ability to be able to access and use that information through their smart devices, such as mobile phones.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan and Scott. Thank you very much. Got another question here from Albamp. Let me just click the little button there. Feel free to unmute if you would like to talk. The question is, how is the process of pushing out data to users?
Yeah, again, I guess depending on the specific use cases, a couple of different approaches. So with the network study, it was not so much a push. It was more, or it's not so much a pull. It was more a push. So in terms of engaging with the correct stakeholders, giving them visibility of the tool, walking them through how to use it, and understanding, I guess the benefits. And then in terms of the dashboard, it's been more of a push initially to make them aware of the tool and how to access it. But then, one of the things we've looked to do is actually measure, user acceptance in terms of measuring, the number of hits we're getting on the report, who are the key users, and then using that information to actually go out to the business and re-engage. But a lot of that information, in particular in the dashboards, being very much pull as opposed to push. Like I said, it's tied to specific programs. People have a very good understanding of those programs and the benefits of participating. It's not so much a push. We've had a lot of pull across the business as a result of the dashboards, because now they can actually get the information where I think in the past they haven't been able to get it in easily. Therefore, they haven't really looked to access it.
And I guess also worth mentioning on the technical side, So Scott mentioned the use of Azure analysis services for the network design dashboard. So when we look at the use of Power BI to consume data from analysis services, it's actually really powerful. You can switch to a direct query model. And in Power BI, you get a live feel as you change the data. The queries are sent back to analysis services to be processed on the server. So that's really helped with the users building up confidence in using it, because it's nice and fast. They can spend more time actually using it, and they're using a good good quality dashboard. And then they are also beginning to ask for more information as well. So technically, that was for the network dashboard. That's how that one was delivered. For the Parts Excellence, I guess the KPI dashboard, the executive dashboard, that's it's essentially just pulling data from a database on a refresh, because the numbers don't change real time. They're all aggregated beforehand and generally refreshed daily. They can be refreshed on demand, but refreshed daily.
Yeah, I think the other call out is, in particular with the network study, now we've been able to demonstrate that capability and show the value of that type of work. We've certainly seen a lot more pull from across the business in terms of opportunities to explore and use the data to drive some real value. So we've effectively leveraged a lot of the work we've done in the network study to drive other activity across the business and deliver benefit. So through demonstrating that capability and the power of being able to communicate it effectively, we've seen a lot more pull from across the business in terms of using our resources to help them drive value through data analytics.
Does that answer your question? Can't hear anything. I'm going to make an assumption that we've answered that question okay. But feel free to reach out to us afterwards for more information. I've got another question as well. I'll put you on the spotlight, Scott, and then we'll probably wrap up. Do we have any tips or approaches for raising awareness or advocacy to business stakeholders and decision makers on the value that can be brought through good design of data presentation?
That's a really good question. I think as an organisation, we've always understood the value of data, and like I said, we're quite rich in data. So we've always seen the benefit and the value of using the data. But I think where we've struggled a little bit is being able to clearly communicate that in an effective way. So I think through these particular use cases, we've been able to demonstrate that and get some real buy-in at the executive level. And we've seen it in more recent times, sort of off of some of the back of the work we've done around COVID-19, the ability to be able to access data and present it, in near real time and show through the visualizations the impact of potential decisions. So I think there's always been an understanding of the value of data. And I think now through, some of the work we've done, in particular in terms of being able to communicate through visualization, there's a broader awareness in the business, and it's really now being driven, I'd say, not even from the top down, but the bottom up as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Scott. I think that probably, reaches the end of the scheduled time. So thank you very much for coming, everyone. I'll be hanging around as well. I don't know, Scott, if you're hanging around, but we'll be here, and my contact details are up on the screen now as well. So please feel free to reach out. Please reach out. Let me know what you thought of the webinar. Very, very relaxed and informal session. But if you would like some really specific information, please let us know. We can easily get that to you. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, pop it into the chat or into the questions box. Thank you, Scott, very much for your time today. It was very helpful to have your insights into how the project has gone and to learn more about your organisation prior to Blackbook's involvement. It's always great to hear a good success story too. So thanks again to you.
Thanks, James. Pleasure.
Cheers.